Hello and welcome back to Calathea. In the last episode we built this huge rich district and a liberal arts campus area. It was a very big build, the biggest one we've done so far, and it doubled the population of the city so far. As these districts are now quite far apart and the population is growing, we need to start on the main city area and get some public transport in. In today's episode, I'm going to be starting the main city with a big roadmap and loads of high density residential to meet the housing demand. So today we're going to be working on this area over here. It's over the highway from the San Francisco inspired district that we did a couple of episodes ago and has great access to a beach for a future build. Today we're going to be mostly working on the residential, and there's going to be a large park area that's going to be filled out in a future build. So let's get started. Okay, so here is the roadmap for this new district. It's a little bit more abstract than some of my recent builds, and I wanted to try something new with this one rather than just making it a boring grid. I wanted to add a very kind of flowing abstract park into the middle of the town and then have a ring road going all the way around it with the rest of the town branching off of it. So the residential area in this town is going to be mainly on the right hand side with the commercial and offices on the left. There's going to be high rise within the ring road that goes around the right hand side and a few bits kind of stepping down towards the outside with a few smaller houses towards the edges. On the lower right hand side, this is going to be kind of a lower income area because that's something that I haven't done in this build so far. I've done historical Spanish buildings, I've done eco, I've done mansions, I've done Victorian style, but I haven't done low income yet. So it's going to be probably mainly vanilla assets because a lot of them will go with this style quite well. And they're not going to be as well serviced as some of the other districts are. Obviously they're still going to have the services around them, but they're not really going to have many in the immediate area, apart from maybe a small bit of industry and some garbage collection. So I may make that part into its own separate district and have the rest of it as a different one, just so I can give them different policies so it kind of fits with the lower to higher income. So I've purposefully left the top part of this district empty because I'm going to be doing that in a future build. And just to give you a little bit of a hint, it's going to be connected to this island over here. So when I get onto this island, I'm going to do the beachfront of this district at the same time. This is what I'm working with today, so let's get stuck into building. Okay, so that's probably all of the high density that I'm going to do for this city today. I might add some more as time goes on. I feel like this is a good amount to stop with. It probably looks a little bit like a concrete hell right now because I haven't done any detailing, but I've left loads of gaps so I can come back and do some detailing later on. Now this is a mix of vanilla and custom assets. Most of the vanilla ones, if not all of them, have come from the Green Cities DLC, and the assets are from a variety of different creators on the workshop. I tried to pick the ones with the most greenery and the most detail in them, and some of them you might recognise from the last build that we did. So I tried to make sure that the balconies weren't going to be too overlooked and that the ones in the best position, like these ones, are going to have the best view out onto the beach and the sea and into the park behind it. So I tried to step them down as I went, but obviously there are some taller ones here and some shorter ones. Some of these are actually low density housing, but they fit really well with the smaller high density housing. So I'm not really too concerned about them being low density. This is a pedestrian road going through here because I didn't want to put a regular road. The gaps that have been left will be filled with some detailing later on. These apartment blocks and the park were actually built to go together, so that's why they kind of snap on so well around the edges. We've got a lot of detailing on the balconies with the chairs and the plants. And these ones from the Green Cities DLC actually went really well with it as well, just to block off the end of this park. I love the greenery waterfall that these have got down the side and the wooden paneling as well. I think all of these little details go so well together, and I know the entrances are back here. We're not going for functionality in this build, we're going for aesthetics, so I'm not too worried about the entrances being blocked or on the back of a lot of these buildings. So in a lot of places I've used the same assets, but I've kind of turned them around to make interesting shapes. Like this one has two facing the same way and then one in the middle facing another. It's got a little glass roof down here, and I actually put paths underneath the concrete in a lot of these places so people will actually be able to walk walk in between the buildings. That's why there's a little lamppost sticking through here. Here's a lot of assets from the same creator, and then one Green Cities one at the back. I love the detailing on these, they're so pretty. And again, I turned some of them around to make it a little bit more interesting, but these two are around the same way. They go up really, really high, so they're not really going to be blocked by anything. They're going to have a great view out into pretty much everything on this entire build. They can pretty much see all the way around from here. So these are going to be the uber rich people that live up here. And the detailing on the balconies on these and the Green Cities buildings, they go so perfectly together. So this bit with custom assets going to this bit with vanilla, and then a little bit more custom down here, they all blend so well together. So again, I moved some of these around to create some interesting shapes. And these ones down here, these two are custom assets, and this one is from the Green Cities DLC. I tried to slot them together so it looks like it's all one piece. These two are separate buildings, and I love the greenery spilling out over the balconies on these. I'm obsessed with it. And the kind of hedges along these balconies on here, I love it so much. And the concrete and the wood and the greenery is exactly what I was going for here. Again, I've got a line of these little tiny high-rise from the Green Cities DLC, and I put the plaza down here, or two plazas, and filled in the gaps down here to make something that they can, you know, look out over. And again, this bit is empty, but it's going to have some stuff in it later on. There's some small high density and some large low density along this road, and again I tried to make sure that their views aren't going to be blocked. So these guys out here on their balconies are going to have a great view, as are the buildings behind it, because there's nothing blocking them. Down here is a little bit more free form, so again I've used a lot of the same assets and just slotted them together in different formations. This bit is going to have some detailing out here in the future. This is another one of the same buildings from before. These are from the Green Cities DLC, all just kind of slotted together. And then here is a park. This section here is a park. It's long and thin. And I put the apartment buildings on here so that it looks like this is how you get into them. Obviously, it's not actually how you get into them because the entrance of this building is actually around the front here, but it looks like they can get in through there. And then here is a little bit more creative. This is a corner building, like an angled corner building. We'll see another one in a minute. And this is kind of a modular piece that slots onto it. I wanted to create this kind of courtyard in the middle and then line it with a row of Green Cities tiny high density buildings. So this is going to have some detailing too. And again, this bit is a mix of Green Cities and custom assets. And there's pathways through the middle here so that people will actually be able to walk through. Over here, I've put 3 of these very large custom assets together to create this kind of wavy big block. And I've filled in all of these areas with concrete just so there's no kind of weird ruined edges, and it's not going to look like this forever. There will be detailing. Over here is a block of custom assets. These ones I thought looked a little bit like buildings that you might see in New York, where you've got these kind of very grand, slightly Art Deco-like buildings looking out over what will be the park area. So I thought these are going to be for fairly rich people here. And then around the back is a few more of the custom assets, mostly from the same creator, and a little park in the corner for some of them to look out onto. And this is where we're going to start getting into the lower income area. So it's starting to step down a little bit. And here is some more of the kind of corner modular pieces, so they fit perfectly in this corner here, and it goes out in 2 different directions. Obviously this is a curved road, so those pieces aren't slotting perfectly together, but we are going to ignore that. And then the lower income area is going to be over here, so I felt like this was a good asset to kind of step down into the lower income area, because this could be used in either area depending on the context you put it in. More Green City stuff here with a parking lot plaza down the middle. There's not masses of parks along these bits that I've made so far, mainly because there's already a lot of detailing in the buildings, there's going to be detailing in the concrete, and this is going to be a park area in the future, so I'm not too worried about their entertainment level, but I thought this fit well between these 2 lots of buildings. Over here is what I like to think is the rich people that like to shove it in other people's faces that they're rich, because these buildings are right on the edge of the lower income area and they're very, very tall. So anyone that lives down here doesn't really have a choice but to look at these massive grand buildings with a slightly smaller one round the back. There's a little sunken plaza around here, and I tried to back these buildings onto it perfectly, so it looks like these gates might open out onto the plaza, and it's kind of all built in for these buildings. There's a few parking spaces under these little carport areas, so I tried to make sure that they're still able to get through and that the driveways aren't blocked at all. Like I said, this is probably going to be the only high density I do in this area for now. Might come back in and do some more later. Now that I finished the high density, I'm going to do a small amount of lower density on these little bits down here, and then I'll move on to the low income area. Okay, there's a small amount of low density housing. It's pretty much the same assets that I used in the last build because this is a fairly wealthy area as well. And I've tried to leave a little bit of a gap between this end of the district and the low income district. I've also added in a road here because I think it would be good to put some sort of larger facility back here, like maybe a hospital, because I don't think we have a hospital on this map yet and the population is growing quite quickly. So I'm going to move on to the low income district now. They're going to have just an elementary school, no high school. If the kids do want to go to school, they can travel to the high school over here because that really isn't that far away. But I'm going to put policies in place so that they go into the workforce rather than continue school. Like I said earlier, it's going to be mostly vanilla housing with some commercial and a small amount of industry. This is going to be where all of the kind of less pleasant facilities are, like the electricity supply, the garbage and things like that. So I'm going to get stuck into building. Okay, so here is my lower income district. Obviously, this isn't like a super low income district. There are some fairly nice houses here, but I didn't want this to be quite as grand as some of the other ones we've done recently. So I've used a mix of vanilla assets and ones from the workshop. They mix quite well together with these very small houses, almost like shacks. They're kind of overgrown and have similar trees. Some of them are a little bit more tropical than others, and I like the kind of worn looking ground in some of them. Some of them are a little bit bigger, and I tried to keep the roof colours consistent, and I kept zooming out and zooming back in to see if any of them were sticking out more than others. And I removed all of the ones that didn't look like they quite fit and left a few kind of garish coloured ones in there, because I feel like a low income area, they wouldn't be as worried about the colour of the buildings as they would in a high income area. So like I said, some of these are a lot nicer than others. A few of them have detailed yards with swing sets and parasols, and then a few of them are a little bit more run down, like this one with the wire fence and the trees out the front, the kind of the grass growing through the path up to the front door. I tried to keep them all very similar back here, so they are mostly assets from the workshop, mostly from the same creator. And I like how this one is kind of hidden in the trees here. It looks like it's kind of been forgotten about in the middle of all of these nicer houses. It's a bit more of a rundown house, and you can see that some of these behind have conservatories and things. They're a little bit nicer. They're kind of getting on to the nicer side of town now, but this is one that maybe they forgot about. And then these again, some of these are a little bit run down like this one, but then some of them like this have a nice conservatory on the back and a little bit more of an interesting shape. So I've got two kind of commercial centres in this town. One of them is in the middle here with a parking lot road going down the back. I tried to use mostly very wide, flat, low buildings. The campus DLC came in really handy for this actually, because they have a lot of low, wide and flat buildings. Like this one here, a few of them across this back road are from the campus DLC. And this corner one is from the workshop, and I thought it went quite nicely in this space here. Obviously it's got a few gaps around the back that I'll do a little bit of detailing. Over here is the primary school. Like I said earlier, I'm only doing a primary school in this one, and the high school will be on the other side of town. So it's got a primary school and a little playground at the back, very basic. I'm going to do some detailing later and put a little fence around this bit just to kind of block it all off, to make the school and the playground feel like they're part of the same piece rather than two separate assets. I thought the vanilla primary school went best with this district style. It's a little bit more gaudy and not as nice looking as the other ones, so it goes with some of the commercial assets and houses. I also thought I'd leave a lot of these billboards on. I took them off in the other districts, but in this district I feel like they fit in. I'm not going to be using a lot of these commercial assets in anything else, so it's fine to leave them on and not remove them with Bob. The other commercial centre is on this side of the town. I've used some large assets on this side, mainly to cover up the coal power plant and the recycling centre behind this. When you're living down here, you won't necessarily be able to see them. Some of these are high density and some of these are just larger, low density buildings, and I've tried to mix and match, and again left the billboards on to match the district. Back here is a few industrial buildings dotted in with some commercial and the recycling centre. Obviously the power plant is back here, so all of the stuff that isn't as nice is tucked around the back here. And on this side is a nicer but smaller commercial and industrial block. There's a parking lot road that goes around the back here, and it's got parking spaces on one side. These buildings are actually commercial buildings, so they kind of fit with the San Francisco build, which is in the background over here. I wanted to kind of bring elements from that district into this one, because they're not actually that far apart. They're kind of just over this roundabout from each other. So a lot of the buildings in this district do have that kind of Victorian style. So these ones here are commercial buildings. They don't really have any detailing on them, but they will act as commercial in the game. And these are commercial buildings as well. They're not exactly the same style, but I thought they went well enough. These two are actually industrial buildings by the same creator I've been using a lot this series. Now this one has a gate over a car park that's round the back, and they're a little bit sleeker than some of the other industrial buildings, so I didn't feel like they needed to be hidden away like the other ones. And they're kind of round the back of the commercial building, so hopefully the trucks won't have to travel as far to get the goods out, because the areas are right next to each other. Over here on the entrance of this district is a small row of high density vanilla assets, and I love this purple colour. I think these buildings go well with the San Francisco style. And then around the back is another row of these assets from the workshop. They slot really nicely together. I had to do a little bit of creative license around this corner because I don't think they're necessarily supposed to go around two sides at once, but I've kind of just smushed them together in the hopes that they'll kind of look like they're joined from a distance. Now this big bit of concrete back here will have stuff on it. It's not just going to stay like this forever, and these bits by the commercial areas will have detailing as well. Like I mentioned earlier, this section over here is going to have a hospital. So the last thing I'm going to do today before doing the detailing is I'm going to fill this section in with the hospital and a few other pieces. Okay, so here is the hospital and healthcare block. There is a sports hall and gym over here and a crematorium as well. Obviously it's looking very sparse at the moment, but I'm going to be doing a ton of detailing around the map to fill in all these empty gaps and give it some life. I'm going to start with the healthcare block and then move into the low income district. here's a very small amount of detailing. I haven't gone too crazy with this because there's still a lot left to do, but I thought this Plaza of the Dead was quite a fitting thing to have in front of a hospital and a crematorium, so it might be a bit cruel, but I have a dark sense of humour, so I think that was perfect. I've put some fences around the car park and a little park in this side, pulled the pathways out like I usually do, and tried to slot them between the houses here. Made a tiny little back garden bit for these houses. The pathway kind of goes underneath that, and I think there's a door down here in this asset, so it looks like you can kind of come out onto the grass here. I didn't put any buildings down the side because this is the transition into the lower income neighbourhood, so I wanted to put a bit of a barrier there. With this suburban school area, all I did was put a fence around it. Now this is the ore industry fence, and it's probably not the most appropriate thing for the primary school, but I thought it matched the fence that was already on here quite well. Even though it's a different colour, there wasn't much that needed doing here. These were already quite detailed, so I spent most of the time in this district doing little bits around the backs of these buildings, like some crack detailing, a few assets here and there. And down this way I put a public restroom, a few of these little trees, so I thought they might want to try and make it look nice, and a few little outdoor eating areas with a few kiosks here. And I like to think that this one on the corner is a restaurant, even though I don't actually know where the door is on this place. I think it might be there. I wish there was a door on the back because that would make this bit perfect. But I put some chairs out the back and a few round each side as well, so people can sit out the sidewalk to eat. And then around the back of this building here, I put some parking spaces, some no parking zones with some bins, and a shopping trolley. There'll be a few shopping trolleys listed around this place. Some bike parking in the middle of each building and over here as well, and some crack detailing and some stains on the floor. I put the flower beds in here to make it look like they tried to make the place look nicer, but it was kind of just putting a band-aid on quite a gross back alley. Down the back here I've just put a few bins out and some shopping trolleys. And over here I've just put a little bit of detailing here and there. There was quite a lot already here, so I've put these parking spaces down the front, put some down here as well, and then on this side I've put a dumpster and a little gate thing over here. And then down here I've put a bin with a massive rubbish pile on the floor and some bins down the side. I find doing trash detailing is a lot easier than doing nice detailing, so this bit was a breeze. I'm also thinking of changing the road style in this district just to signify that it is a lower income area. I'm going to change it from tree-lined roads to just regular roads. I've done just the roads in the middle, and I've left the ones around the edges because the rich people probably still want their trees. And I'm probably going to change the tree style from these kind of yellowy green trees into one that's a bit more district appropriate. Maybe an acacia or one of the older trees, possibly even a palm if I'm feeling super fancy. But now I'm going to do a little bit of detailing in the high-rise blocks and fill out this bit here with some trees and some more detailing around these empty areas. so the detailing is complete. There's a lot more to do than I thought there was going to be, and a lot of very small areas to fill in. But these little plant container box thingies with benches came in so handy. I've used these everywhere. They have 3 different skins. Some of them have benches and bins and stuff, some of them don't. And they just fill these gaps so nicely, and they fit really well with this kind of overgrown green tropical theme. So I've put some out the front of these eco buildings, as well as some planters with some acacias. I've done tiny bits of detailing in between the buildings, like some parking gates. A lot of these buildings were really detailed as it is and quite close together, so I couldn't really do much in some of these areas. But I tried to fill any gaps with these little planters, like the bit outside the front of these apartment blocks here and down the sides, just to kind of keep that continuous theme going, and through here as well. I didn't want to overdo it too much, but people will come and sit on these benches, which is quite nice, so they definitely will use them, and it gives the area an entertainment boost because they count as plazas. Now over here I wanted to do something a little bit different, and I downloaded some pool assets while I was building this because I suddenly decided that I wanted the back of this apartment complex to have a swimming pool. So even though these buildings aren't super fancy, I've given them a really fancy kind of backyard with a swimming pool, which is actually quite small, but I couldn't find any larger ones, and some beds and a few little sofas. And I've kept it nice and sandy with a kind of tropical garden enclosed in some fences. I didn't really have any nice low fences other than this wood one, so this is going to have to be what it is for the moment. But I thought that's sort of different to what I've done before, and it kind of makes it look a lot nicer and fancier, and it kind of carries across the theme from the mansions that have the pools. A lot of these areas I have just filled with trees because it's a lot easier to fill the gaps with stuff like that than plopping everything individually, because that does take a lot of time. I didn't really do too much over here because these buildings are already quite close together and already quite detailed. But on this side, I just put some of these planter boxes down here, lined this side with some flowers, and put a few little benches outside this apartment block with a little fountain at the back as well. I didn't really do anything to this block either because there wasn't really space to put much, and I couldn't really do anything here because it would block this driveway. So I've left this as it is for now. So this ended up being a much larger build than I was expecting it to be, and I think this has taken me again about 4.5 hours, much like the last episode, to complete. But I'm very happy with the way that it's ended up. I love the contrast of this high-rise, super detailed, green, manicured side of the city with the bit grottier, not so nice, stained and dirtied lower income neighborhood. I really enjoy doing detailing in grubbier areas, so that I actually prefer doing that to more manicured areas. Although of course my favorite thing is making these green spaces in between the houses to fill in the gaps so that you don't have these kind of weird empty spaces. But I feel like I fit a lot in here, but there's still a lot to go in this district. Obviously there's the park area to do in the middle, and then the other side is going to be more commercial, offices and some schools as well, possibly a university later on in the series if they need it. So for now, this is where I'm going to end today's episode. We're really starting to come along now with this build, and I'm 5 episodes in, filled a fair amount of this map already. Some of the builds have been a lot smaller than others, but like I mentioned before, I am going to be coming in and doing a few small residential areas in between episodes because they're really demanding housing, and I don't want to just keep doing the same residential builds over and over and over again. I want to make sure that each residential build that I do is different to the last one in some way, and I feel like all of them up until this point have been different. The only thing that I haven't done so far is a Mediterranean high-rise build, and I may do that later in the series, but I'm going to move away from residential builds for the next few episodes, and I'm going to be focusing on transport, parks, tourism, and possibly a little bit more industry if they need it, because we still haven't done any oil. I do have an area planned out for that in the future, but I won't be able to do that until they need it because the buildings will just demolish themselves after I put them down. So we need people, and hopefully with this high-rise district, this will get a lot of people in, because some of these buildings fit like 25 households. So that's a huge amount of people that will hopefully be moving in. So in the next episode, I'm going to be focusing on public transport, because like I mentioned in the previous episode, all of these districts are now quite far away from each other, and the highways are starting to get quite busy because we don't have a single form of public transport yet. And if you've watched any of my other videos, like the Plum Valley series, you'll know that public transport is one of my favorite parts about this game. I love to use different forms of public transport to make the most efficient network that I can to get as many cars off of the road as possible. So make sure to come back on Tuesday so you can see how I get on with that. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.